at a New York City high school, but he was also a murderer and the leader of a violent Bronx Street Gang. In June 2024, Israel Garcia was sentenced to life plus 5 years for the murder of a gang rival in a deadly drug turf war. Known as Shorty Rock, Garcia led the Get Money Gunners, a faction of the notorious Young Gunners. For over a decade, he controlled the drug trade around East 184th Street and Morris Avenue in Fordham Heights, and would engage in back-and-forth shootings with rival gangs. And one shootout resulted in the murder of 21-year-old Alfonso Joey McClinton. McClinton was gunned down on a residential street, and after an investigation into the murder, Young Gunners Joseph Juice Johnson was arrested and convicted for McClinton's death. Further inquiries and video evidence later exposed Garcia as a second shooter. Working at the New Visions Charter High School for the Humanities, Garcia tried to present himself as a law-abiding citizen, and many of his students still claim that he was an inspiration to them. But whilst secretly orchestrating the Young Gunners' criminal activities, he would recruit children and others into his drug enterprise, flooding the community with crack cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl, and violently protecting his turf with gun warfare. Young Gunners were founded 2003 by Juther Jew Hef Perez in the Patterson housing projects in the Bronx. Alongside his leadership were close allies King Mighty, Two Fly Tay, and Moy, who all became known as the Big Guns. To try and gain control of the streets, the Young Gunners would frequently engage in shootouts with rivals such as the Original Goons and Big Money Bosses. But it was the fatal beating of 16-year-old Goons member Moises Laura that made Young Gunners make headlines. In April 2012, around 20 Young Gunners members got drunk and began arguing among themselves about who had done the most for the gang. To settle their dispute, they walked into Original Goons territory in the Melrose housing projects, where they spotted Laura and kicked and stomped on him so badly that he died later in hospital. Laura's brutal death was a shock to the Bronx community, and in what has been claimed to potentially be an act of revenge, a year later, Juther Perez was victim to a deadly beating from a rival gang. Perez was at the Tropicana nightclub on 1060 Home Street when a brawl broke out between Young Gunners and rival gang Young Flybridge, who have been known to affiliate with Original Goons. Perez was beaten on the head with the glass base of a hookah pipe by Melvin Davis. When the glass shattered, Davis used the metal rod inside it to continue pounding Perez, leaving him with broken bones in his face. After going into a coma, Perez died a week later. Davis was convicted of first-degree manslaughter. Despite Perez not being around, Young Gunners still had a notorious reputation in the Bronx, so much so that they were part of what was said to be the largest gang takedown in New York City's history, after cops and federal agents arrested 120 members of Two Fly Young Gunners and rivals Big Money Bosses. But in what has now become known as the infamous Bronx 120 gang raid on the Eastchester Gardens and Edenwald House housing projects, reports soon revealed that in fact fewer than half of them were actually accused of being gang members in prosecutors' sentencing submissions. But that didn't stop many of those arrested being paraded in front of the media for what some say was simply law enforcement propaganda. Part of the reason for Young Gunners' preference to recruit kids is said to be because of New York's Raise the Age law in 2018, which bumped the age at which a teen can be prosecuted as an adult up to 18. After the law was passed, the Bronx became a victim to an influx of violence from kids who didn't fear cops, and teenage Young Gunners were also victims. In July 2021, 16-year-old Young Gunners member Ramon Gil Medrano sat in the back of an Uber in the Bronx neighborhood of Mount Hope when two gunmen rode up on a scooter and shot him. It was claimed that the hit on Gil Medrano was payback for the murder earlier that night of 13-year-old Jerry Elliott, whose chilling, cold-blooded execution was caught on camera outside Angel's Cafe in the Belmont section of the Bronx. Not long after Gil Medrano's shooting, cops were quickly able to bust 15-year-old Alec McFarlane and 19-year-old Mecky Williams for the murder due to them stupidly bragging about it on social media. Despite Israel Garcia's conviction, Young Gunners' presence will still plague the Bronx as they continue to recruit young members with promises of power and status. This cycle of violence has left lasting scars on the community, leaving many to question if it will ever end.